So, in winters is a air pollution hazard. What is left in between? Days like today remind you that monsoon never arrived in Delhi. Only humidity arrived. Right? Now, if there would be a index of the worst living metro city in India, Delhi would top it by a big margin, right? When you live in Delhi, you prepare for UPSC for 5 years. You're not just missing those 5 years that you spend in Delhi. You also, life expectancy at least 2-3 years you will lose, right? So, moral of the story, don't prepare for 5 years. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to continue forward the discussion from yesterday. You'll also get a handout, or you've also received the handout already, on the decline of Mughals, right? So what I was doing yesterday was I was giving you a brief background about how the Mughals came to power. And when we were discussing that, we were talking about 1526 was the year when Babur came to India, defeating the Lodhis. 1556 is when Akbar started establishing and consolidating as well as expanding the Mughal Empire in north and central India. And I told you that roughly from 1556 all the way up to 1607 he is there. And then 50 years after Akbar comes the rule of Aurangzeb. And it is during his period, you would see that there is an expansion largely into the Deccan territories. And we've all seen that, right? So it is this did that brief discussion, 1656 to 1707. Now, the question is as to what happens after it, as to what or why the decline of the Mughal Empire was witnessed. Now, to understand about this decline of the Mughals, I told you that we cannot understand the decline merely by looking at what? Leadership. That just because a leader is there, an empire rises, and a leader goes, the empire declines. Such an explanation is a very incomplete or a very limited explanation. Now, then what is a better explanation? See, whenever you look at history, whenever you look at any major event or a series of events, an event may happen, say today, we say, for example, suppose there's a conflict between India and China. Suppose there's a war between India and China, or between India and Pakistan, or for any two countries. Say there is an ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, right? Now, whenever you look at a war or any major set of events, not everything may be a war. For example, the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union dissolved by 1990. It was a breakup of a large piece of territory ruled by the Soviet Union. And following which Russia became separate, Central Asian countries became separate. A lot of countries in Eastern Europe became independent. So it was an event, it was not a war. But whether it is the collapse of Soviet Union or World War I or World War II or a India-China or a India-Pakistan conflict, every conflict can be understood at two levels. One level is an immediate cause, where you say that so and so thing happened and this led to the conflict. Okay. Now, for example, Russia and Ukraine are fighting over some piece of territory, whether it is Crimea, whatever, some piece of territory. So you may say it's a conflict over a particular territory. But if it is a conflict over merely a particular piece of territory, then why did the conflict suddenly break out 2 years ago? The conflict would have been there for a long time, right? Nothing changed. But suddenly 2 years ago, Russia and Ukraine start fighting over a piece of land. That can be understood as a more immediate cause. But going beyond immediate, you may find there are more underlying reasons which are which have been there in the background for a long time. Think of it like a volcano. Okay, a volcano may erupt suddenly one day and then may lie sort of inactive for the next 100 years. But it is not inactive. It's just that we can't see. The underlying tension is there and it may again erupt in the future. So what you will find is that there is a underlying cause that we can look at. Or I can say immediate or underlying, or I can say immediate or certain long-term factors, and there are certain immediate or short-term factors. There is another way. That other way is to look into any major war or event and try to analyze what are the, when I'm looking at the underlying reasons, are there certain political, economic or other factors that play which trigger a war. Suppose tomorrow, I'm giving you other examples first rather than just, suppose tomorrow India and China, forget India and China, suppose there is a conflict between India and Bangladesh. Okay, that conflict may happen, for example, over sharing of water of rivers. Now you may say this conflict is over a sharing of water of rivers, but conflict, water sharing of these rivers has been going on for centuries. The rivers have been flowing the way they have been flowing, right? Then why all of a sudden they may fight today? Because it may quite be possible that climate change is changing the rainfall pattern, is changing the flow pattern of the rivers, which may make it more difficult to share water, broadly speaking. So while rivers were the same, countries were the same, an underlying tension was there of how do you manage water sharing between two countries. But a precipitating event or an immediate trigger became what? Climate change. You get it? So there can be underlying tensions and there can be immediate causes. Now when I talk about decline of Mughals, we will look at certain immediate factors and we look at certain underlying factors. While talking about underlying, we will divide them into political, economic, partly those related to the army, and even social causes. These are all underlying. But the trigger will be the death of Aurangzeb. So Aurangzeb's death is more of a trigger. It's not the complete explanation. I hope this context is clear. But before we go into the causes, first thing which is important for prelims also, we should understand is the the Mughal administrative structure in the 1700s. How the Mughals carried out their administration in the 1700s, we must know, because without that we can't understand the decline. Okay. So, and this has been asked repeatedly in prelims about jagirdari, ijardari, khalisa. These are MCQs which are asked from this aspect of later Mughal administrative structure. All of that will become clear. When it comes to dictate, I will dictate, but whatever I'm writing, you write till I'm writing on the board. Okay. Now, in terms of decline of Mughals and the administrative structure, you would find that at the center of the Mughal administration was the king, the Mughal ruler. The king would often be assisted by his nobility. The king would often be assisted by the nobility. And this nobility involved basically a number of nobles who came from three groups. These nobles came from three groups called the Irani, Turani and Hindustani groups. These three groups, who were the Iranis, Turanis and Hindustanis? Let me give you a context. The Mughals, they themselves came from where? Central Asia, I told you. The Mughals came from Central Asia. The languages spoken in Central Asia are all of a Turkish origin. Okay. Turkey is not in Central Asia. It is where? It is somewhere very close to Europe. Adjacent to Greece is where Turkey is. Okay. So Turkey is in, if I was to say, in West Asia. But Central Asian countries are also known as Turkic. Why? Because they speak the Turkish language or its many variants. Okay. So the nobles who came from where? Central Asia, in the Mughal nobility, they are the Turani group of nobles. The nobles who came from Iran are the Irani group of nobles. How come? Dekhiye, Turkish origin nobles come why? Because Babur himself is a Turk. It's partly of a Turkish origin. Right? And there are a number of other Turks they married into. Marital linkages are also there. On the other hand, when you look at whom? Irani group of nobles. Mughals are not Iranian in origin. They are not of origin from Iran. But they have nobles of Iranian origin. Why? Because Humayun, I have not discussed, but Humayun spent roughly 15 years in Iran. And in those 15 years, he married amongst the Iranian nobility also. Not just Iranian nobility they married into, they had other linkages with Iran as well. So you had people of Iranian origin also in the Mughal nobility. More importantly, the Irani nobles spoke a distinct language and would often marry amongst themselves. And the same would apply to whom? The Turani group. So there are different groups of nobility who often have distinctive language, different cultures, and would often not even intermarry. So there are different groups. Do you get this basic point? There's nothing much to understand. There's nothing much to write here. Just understand. Also, what you would find are the Hindustani nobles. They would consist of both Muslims, Indian Muslims, as well as other who were non-Muslims also. For example, like the Rajputs. They were nobles of a Indian origin. Okay. And they would be native Muslims from within India or Rajputs or other prominent non-Hindu ruler, non-Muslim rulers as well. They also became a part of the Mughal nobility. Dekhiye, I have not told you this before, but if I was to tell you one simple fact for now, Akbar figured out very early in 1660s, Akbar figured out very early that the Mughals will not be able to rule over North India also unless they figure out a relationship with whom? The different set of Rajput rulers. There was not one unified Rajput state. There were different Rajput rulers in different areas. And the Mughals came to this understanding that we need some sort of a working relationship with whom? The Rajputs. And Akbar's idea was very simple, that whether it can be a marital alliance or it can be an alliance where Rajputs and Mughals will reach a compromise. The Mughals will be recognized as a more superior authority. And in return, the Rajput territories will be left in a self-governed state in many areas. Meaning the Rajputs can continue administration but become a part of the Mughal empire. Also, many Rajputs would be given powerful positions in the Mughal administration. The idea was to absorb the Rajput rulers into the Mughal administration, either through marriage or through giving them a share of the power or by war. By war meaning those who are unwilling to join the Mughals, they may face a war. But war was not the only instrument to deal with the Rajputs. And there's a whole history I don't want to go into. It's complex. It cannot be summarized in 2 minutes. But you see, they are using all means available. So right from the time of Akbar, they are willing to accommodate also and have a working relationship with the Rajputs. So you have Rajput nobles in Mughal administration right up till the Aurangzeb era. One of Aurangzeb's highest noble was Jai Singh, who was one of the rulers of Amber, who was also a Rajput ruler. So you see, they have all these groups of nobles. Why am I telling you this background? It's for a reason. That all these three groups of nobles would themselves be acting as pressure groups. They will try to put pressure on whom? The king. For what purpose? That I'll explain. But these three are competing groups, or they're competing pressure groups, and they are distinctive culturally, linguistically, and even in certain cases religiously. Like Iranis and Turanis both were Muslims, but that's not enough. If I was to tell you a very simple and a basic fact, many people believe that, just imagine, a lot of times you would be told that, for example, people who come from any XYZ religion, they all have similar political ideas, ambitions, and whatever, goals. If that would have been the case, then West Asia has not one country, has many countries. All of them are predominantly Muslims, but you have Iran also, you have Saudi Arabia also, you have Oman also, you have Dubai also, you have UAE also, you have UAE also, you have Bahrain also, you have Iraq also. These are just some of them. You have Syria also, you have Lebanon also, right? You have Jordan also. So why so many? If all of them have same interest, and just because they belong to the same religion, they have same political and economic interest, then you should have one state only, na? That's not the case. There are compelling reasons why they are not. There's not one state in West Asia. There are many states, even though they may share certain degree of similarity because of having one predominant religion in the area, right? And so what I'm trying to say is, just because the religion is same doesn't mean that they're not going to fight amongst them. They'll fight a lot, as we'll see. Whom? These three social groups. Now I'm coming back here. So as I said, there's the king and there's the nobility at the center. Now, I told you yesterday something that you would do well to remember, that there have been only 3 times in the last 3,000 years or so that there have been pan-Indian empires, right? A Mauryan empire, we said, then we said Mughals, then we said British. Why have been pan-Indian empires? Why pan-Indian empires have been so rare? Any idea? Or why are they so infrequent, if I was to say so? Why are they so infrequent? Power struggle. Okay. Anything else? Administrative challenges. All of you can, for example, think of one challenge is size. It's a huge area to be governed. Let me give you a context. Maharashtra, the state of Maharashtra, geographically speaking, in size, is equivalent to a country called France. Okay, it's just that if you see a normal map or a globe, you may find India, if you see a globe specifically, you may find India may seem much smaller than Europe. It's nothing but a distortion of map making. It's not real. If you just go on Wikipedia, see the square kilometer area of India and square kilometer area of France, you will find it's not there. For example, if you look at Africa, Africa can engulf all the countries and still have space. It can engulf whole of Europe and Asia and still have space for more countries. So the accurate depiction is never possible on a globe. Okay. What I'm trying to say is, geographically it's large, right? So okay. Now that geographically being large, or a large geographical size, creates what? As you said, an administrative challenge. But this administrative challenge word is a very broad term. What administrative challenges? For example, it can create challenges in terms of how do you collect tax over such a large territory. Or if, say, there is a rebellion in Jammu and Kashmir, say, not bad, there is a rebellion in Tamil Nadu, suppose, and if the information of an armed rebellion in Tamil Nadu reaches a ruler in Delhi 1 month later, then that's a problem, right? What I'm saying, another administrative challenge stems from the fact that modern means of communication, which allow quick movement of either people or information, is only a fairly recent phenomenon. You'll find that 1850s is the time, and a bit before that you have the telegraph, and after that you have the railways. So telegraph and railways has allowed movement of troops quickly, and telegraph has allowed movement of information. So even if you get the information quickly, you can dispatch additional troops to suppress a rebellion. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that these administrative challenges are, for example, in collection of tax collection, or in maintenance of army, or in quick dissemination of what? Information. All of which is very vital to have a stable empire. So it's very rare. Today it is possible. You have much more modern means of technology available. You can move troops, air, water, land, whatever. You have internet, which allows states to, allow quick communication. So all of this is something very important. So today it is easier. Back then it is extremely difficult. And that is why it has been tough. Let me give you an example. For example, today you have what? In every part of India or the world, you will find you'll have CCTVs. CCTVs also help whom? You may say it is for your security or whatever, whatever, it is for your security. But the primary purpose that the CCTV is also serves, one of the primary, it helps whom? The state. To keep a watch over whom? People. So that if anybody is creating too much trouble, they can be taken care of. You may think that of it in terms of whether the person causing trouble is a murderer, or a kidnapper or whatever, or stealing your car. But it can be used against, if I am trying to plot an overthrow of the government and there is a CCTV listening or watching, then you can take care of me as well, right? Hypothetically speaking, just because somebody takes this out of context and then quotes me somewhere. What I'm trying to tell you is that modern surveillance also becomes more easier if you have better technology. The classic example of this in the world, which has achieved this to near perfection, is China. Now you may be thinking, why are you telling us all this nonsense? We are talking about decline of Mughals. I'll explain, but in some time. When I say, for example, about China, China is considered today as one of the examples of a state which has made extremely good use of technology to keep a close watch. And this is a very polite way of saying surveillance over its citizens. In China, wherever you go, there's something that's called a social credit score. A social credit score is a score out of 100 that you get. And this credit score, the social score, basically, for arriving at this score, there is information that the government collects. For example, all over China, you have face recognition cameras. And so if you jump the red light, your score goes down. If you post something on the social media which is critical of the government, your score goes down. If somebody reports a case against you of intimidation, your score goes down. If you obviously have friends also on social media who have posted something anti-government, your score goes down. Once your score falls below a certain limit, your passport would be seized. You cannot leave the country. And so, this is, if your score falls below a certain level, your internet access will be shut down for your phone number and for your aspects, or your social account will be down. In certain areas of Shanghai, you cannot be allotted a house if your score is below a certain level. This is the ultimate dream of a surveillance state, where the state can monitor each and every action so that anybody who may be even thinking of planning can be taken care of. So technology does help the state. Right from the Arthashastra written by Kautilya and all, there has always been a very strong mention of the relevance of spies for state. States need spies to collect intelligence, not just what other countries are planning, but you need intelligence about your own subjects as well. So things like this often help the state keep a close watch over its own citizens also, which may crush political dissent and all of those things. Why did I tell you? What is the, suppose, and you will find that, for example, the interface of, I'll tell you. Suppose there's an essay topic on technology and its implications for the 21st century. Then students say, technology can be both a boon or a bane. Nuclear energy can be used to make nuclear weapons, or it can be used to generate green energy or electricity. Technology in good hands is very useful for human civilization. Technology in bad hands is detrimental for human civilization. This is a 6th class essay. This is not a UPSC level insight. The idea also is that technology can be used to solve many problems of people by the state. For example, you have what is UPI, making millions of transactions possible instantly at low or no cost and allowing people to make transactions effortlessly. That's a very use of technology which eases the life of citizens. At the same point of time, a CCTV is a classic example of a dual use technology. CCTV can be used for what? Putting outside your house and keep a watch that a burglar doesn't come and steal your car. But if you turn the CCTV inwards, it's an invasion of privacy. And not just privacy of what you do in your personal life, but it is also an invasion of your political freedom. Right? So technology can also be a threat to democracy, if especially you have things which are dual use technologies, which if used with the right intent can be used to meaningfully empower people and citizens, and if used negatively can be used to crush political dissent. So technology is a boon or bane. It depends on how you are using it, but you can come with better examples and all those things. Let's come back here. So where did I drift here a bit? See, drifting is always very useful in UPSC as long as you drift and still stay within the domain. So what I try to do, technological challenges, administrative challenges, tax collection challenges, movement of army, all of it is a challenge. And so it's difficult to build a big state, a state with huge territorial size. But the Mughals were able to do this. The question is how, right? So for this, the Mughals depended on having a very elaborate administrative structure, and that involved that the king and the nobility would be at the center. The whole territories would be divided into a number of provinces. Like there would be Awadh, like there would be Bengal, or there would be Hyderabad. For each of the provinces, the Mughals also appointed a governor. This governor is not like the governor today, but this governor is basically the eyes and ears of the king. They are appointed by whom? Governor. They are removed by whom? Governor. They are appointed by governor, they are removed by governor. They don't have any fixed term. It is governor's decision. It is the ruler's decision whom they want to appoint. Often people who would be appointed as governors would receive a huge salary and would often be ones whom the king considered as loyal to them. But where would these governors come from? These governors would come from the Irani, Turani and the Hindustani groups. The Iranis, whether it was the Iranis, Turanis or Hindustanis, all wanted that the governors appointed must be members from their family, their sons, their nephews, their uncles. So they wanted the powerful and prestigious positions to go to the members of their family or their extended group. Below the governor, in every province, there was further division into what were called as groups of villages, and these groups of villages was an administrative unit which was called as Jagir. Today, for example, in a district you have many villages. For a district also you will have many villages, right? And for example, in a district you have urban area and rural area. Rural area is divided into number of villages. या फिर district के अंदर today there are blocks are further divided into villages, whatever it is. But you can consider a Jagir as some sort of a district. It's an administrative unit. This Jagir, and there would be different Jagirs. Some would be small, some would be big. These Jagirs would be headed by who we call as individuals appointed by, again, the king, called as the Jagirdars. They would head whom? They would head a Jagir. And all these Jagirdars are also appointed by whom? The king. I'll give time. Let me explain this whole, then I'll give time. All these Jagirdars also appointed by the king. Now, who are these Jagirdars? I'll explain. These Jagirdars are also very powerful individuals. Okay. Think of them, say, if you want to think of them as a DM of a district, who's a very powerful individual. But please understand, here is no exam to recruit a Jagirdar. The Jagirdar again would be members of this nobility. The Jagirdars would also be derived from the nobility, and often these Jagirdars would also be coming from nobility, from the Irani, Turani and Hindustani groups. And there would always be a competition between whom? The Iranis, Turanis and Hindustanis. That can they get their family members, the bigger Jagirs, or can they get that maximum members of their families must be appointed to powerful positions like the positions of governors. So there would be an internal rivalry within whom? The Mughal administration. But one thing I have not answered here. What is this Jagirdar doing? This Jagirdar is the most important element of Mughal administration. Why did I compare a Jagirdar to a DM? A DM is like the last major senior official of the government of India. Okay, so in a many way, you have 640 districts, you have 640 DMs, hypothetically, or maybe more. They are somehow the representation of the government of India. They are the last major powerful authority, and thus it's a significantly important position. The same is with Jagirdar. But, and I'll give you time to ask questions, but before that, let me explain this full completely. What are these Jagirdars doing? These Jagirdars would be performing a very crucial function. These Jagirdar who were in charge of a group of villages would be given twin responsibilities or two responsibilities. One responsibility would be tax collection. The other responsibility would be maintenance of troops. Let me explain this. And I'll ask you another interesting question. I want you to see the first 2-3 classes. I will go slow. The objective is to make you think more. What is the Jagirdar doing? The Jagirdar's first responsibility is to collect tax. Tax will come from what? Taxation of agriculture. Now, let me pose another question to you. I told you Akbar expanded the Mughal Empire. Aurangzeb expanded the Mughal Empire. But they are not the only ones. You will find everybody in medieval India and in medieval Europe and medieval world. Everybody wanted to expand their empires. Even in ancient era, Ashoka also fought Battle of Kalinga to expand Mauryan Empire. You all have heard about Alexander the Great. Name everybody has heard, right? Alexander the Great was also a big emperor who also fought many wars and won many wars and conquered a lot of territory. So you would find ancient India, ancient world, medieval India, medieval world, everybody is trying to conquer more territory. Here is the question to you. Look around yourself today. Which is the world's biggest economy and biggest military and the biggest power? The United States. Have you seen USA trying to go ahead, grab territory in any major way and establishing its rule over these territories? The short answer is no, right? I may agree that US has intervened in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in many places, but what I'm saying is trying to capture territory and establish its own rule and presence over these territories. The short answer is no. Britain and France were doing this in 1600s and 1700s and even 1800s. But today, do you see Britain and France doing this? You don't. What about China? Do you see China doing it? The short answer is it's unpopular, but the short answer is no. You may think it is because we have a certain issue with China, which is a border issue or a border dispute with China or Aksai Chin or Arunachal Pradesh, whatever. But till now, China hasn't gone ahead and said, okay, Korea, now we'll rule over you. Chinese government opens a new administrative wing in Korea and is like, Korea, let's take it. Now, there's a lot of China tension over Taiwan, and that's a very different case altogether. I'm not going it. But do you see China is telling Japan, 100 years ago, you conquered us. Now it's our time. We will conquer you and we will rule over Japan. Japan conquered China in World War II. Okay, 1945. But China is not doing the same. US is not doing the same. Britain is not doing the same. France, Russia. You may say Russia is conquering. Russia is not doing the same. Russia is not looking to grab. Russia doesn't have a plan that, okay, we started on Ukraine, next step Poland, next step Belarus, then it takes us to Germany, we'll take Germany, then France. There's nothing, no such plan Mr. Putin has in place. No intention to do so. What I'm trying to tell you is, modern states today are not looking at aggressive territorial expansion, like was visible in medieval states. India also has no such intentions. You may say Pakistan has such intentions. Again, if you just ignore the Kashmir issue for a moment, you won't even find, and Pakistan is a unique case, so let's not go there. It's a unique case. Okay. But you will find major, stable, powerful countries and economies are not looking to capture more and more territory. Why? What has changed? What has changed is the nature of economy. See, medieval states, including Mughals, including Marathas, including everybody, whether in India or abroad, were what we call as war states. A war state, Shekhar Bandyopadhyay writes in Plastic to Partition that medieval states, including the Mughals, were war states. What is a war state? A war state is where you decide to do a startup. Babur did a startup that's called the Mughal Empire. Babur had no future left in Uzbekistan and these regions. He was an able fighter. He is like, let me cobble up a group of a couple of hundred soldiers. And what will we do? With these soldiers, we will raise our own army. And with this army, what will we do? We will go and capture territory. First they did in Afghanistan, for example. Once they capture territory or land, they will raise what? Land revenue tax. With this tax, they can now pay their troops and even hire additional troops. And now you have thus a bigger army. And a bigger army can thus capture more land and more revenue and more bigger army and more land. You have a startup. This is a political startup where what you are getting are a group of able soldiers saying that, look, stick with me. We'll launch a war. We'll plunder, we'll loot, we'll grab territory, whatever it takes. We will win this and you will make a lot of money. And then we will hire more. This is what happens. A startup. We will raise money. We will hire workers. We will make profit. We will hire more workers. So this is a war state. Fighting wars is necessary for economic gains. Constant territorial expansion is the objective of the state, because grabbing more territories means grabbing more economic gains. There is a constant desire to capture more land and territory. Why? Because land is the primary source of revenue. Today, is agriculture taxed in India? There is 0% agricultural tax in India. If you are a farmer, you don't have to pay any tax. You could argue farmer doesn't earn anything to pay any tax. If I was to tell you unpopular opinion, a lot of people who are sitting in the parliament today claim to be farmers just so that they don't have to pay any tax. If anybody comes from a state like Maharashtra would know, there are some politicians from there who are sitting in the parliament who say, we have 1 acre land, and from this 1 acre land we are earning 10 crore rupees. What is what are you growing in 1 acre of land that you can get 10 crore rupees? And that is all tax free because they don't have to pay a tax. No taking names. Okay. Now, what I'm trying to say, agriculture is not the primary source of taxation for the state today or the revenue for the state. What is it? It is manufacturing or services. What you don't no longer want, what you manufacturing means, manufacturing an iPhone or manufacturing a car or a service like a TCS or a Infosys or whatever. Export softwares. You don't want to capture land anymore. You want to capture markets. So what does China want? Market. What does US want? Market. They don't want land. Right? So the nature of the state has changed. We don't have many wars. We don't have many war states. We still may have some war states who have figured out this building roads, highways, setting up manufacturing units, then grabbing market. This is too long. Fight war. Still short. There may be states which still have a medieval mindset, which still want to work as a war state. I am not saying that wars happen only because of economic reasons. Wars may happen because of many other reasons also. It can be political, cultural, or many other reasons also. But wars today are, you may feel, are very frequent. The answer is they are less frequent than ever before recorded in human history. After 1945, the last 75, 80 odd years have been the most peaceful years in human recorded history, where we have less wars. I am not saying it will remain the same in the future. Okay. But it has been. Part of it has been because the focus of many of these countries has been to capture markets rather than capture land. Okay, things may change in the future, and they will. I mean, we will watch a US and China war, is my prediction, somewhere as long as we are alive. And it would be interesting to watch. I'm not saying it would be good or bad, happy or sad. It would just be interesting. Why? Because there are many other reasons because of which countries can also fight. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is that that medieval states were war states constantly looking to expand, meaning they need a very well armed and a very well equipped army. If you don't have an army, you can't be a war state. If your army doesn't win wars, your war state will collapse. Is that much clear? So there is going to be a strong emphasis on maintaining a certain degree of armed preparedness. Without that, a medieval state really cannot survive. And Jagirdar is very important for it. How? Because a Jagirdar was given the responsibility of tax collection, which would come from agriculture. This tax collected would be broken into three parts. One part would go directly to whom? The king. The other part would be used for maintaining troops. And the third part would be a share of whom? The Jagirdar himself. So one part of the tax collected would be the share of the Jagirdar. He would use another part to maintain troops, and one part would go to the king. So three parts. Okay. So what you would find is that from every Jagir, what you would find is that the king is directly getting a share of the revenue. And also, and you can write with me certain characteristics of the Jagirdari system first, which are important for prelims. That in terms of these characteristics, who appointed the Jagirdar? King. Not just appointed, but also could remove the Jagirdar. A Jagirdar was given a rank. A Jagirdar was given a rank, and also was given what was called as a responsibility. The rank referred to the Jat, or basically the Jat was a term used for the rank. What is a rank? For example, in army you have rank, you have captain, major, colonel, all of them are ranks. So the Jat referred to the rank of a Jagirdar. He is like an army guy. He is like a military commander. Who? A Jagirdar. And each of these Jagirdars would be given, the king would give a responsibility of maintaining a specified number of what? Troops and horses. Let me explain. A Jagirdar, for example, would be given a responsibility of maintaining 5,000 troops and 500 horses. If you were a really, really important person in Mughal administration, you would be given a rank like 5,500. One of the highest ranks they gave were 5,000, or in very rare cases 6,000. That's it. If you were a middle level person, important but probably not that important, you would be given something around 2,200. So depending on who was how important, they were given different number of savars to maintain. How will the Jagirdar maintain these Sawars? From the revenue that they collect from the Jagir. The more important the Jagirdar, the bigger the number of Sawars he was supposed to maintain, and the bigger was the size of Jagir he was given. So certain very fertile Jagirs, which had high productivity, which could grow 2 or 3 crops in a year, the revenue from there would be higher. So automatically those bigger and important Jagirs were given to more important individuals. So देखिए ऐसे समझ लीजिए, you become DM of Sri Ganganagar or you become DM of Jaipur. Both of them are in Rajasthan. One is the capital and the other is a very peripheral district. Randomly I just said 2 districts which came to my mind. Which will be more sought after position? Becoming a DM of Jaipur or becoming a DM of a state capital or a DM of a very marginal district? State capital. Yes. The same thing here is that there is different levels of Jagirdars. Not all Jagirdars rank is equal, nor are they expected to maintain the same number of Sawars. So allocating Jagirdaris, allocating Jagirdaris is a political decision being made by whom? The king, and the king alone. There is no exam, no competition, nothing. The king is like, this is how I'll allocate. Here is another question. So I told you one portion of the revenue is for maintaining the troops, another portion goes to the king, and the third portion, the Jagirdars would also maintain a very lavish lifestyle of their own. So these are prestigious positions. This much so you have understood. Yes. Now the question is the Jagirdar the owner of the land? Please understand, Jagirdar is not the owner of land. The land belongs to the king. Nobody owns the land but whom? The king. In medieval societies, there is no such. The king may give you right to collect revenue, and the king may give the right to whom? Peasant, to cultivate a piece of land. But that doesn't make the peasant the owner of the land or the Jagirdar the owner of the Jagir. Absolutely clear. It is today in modern societies, we say that there is an idea of right to property. That you become the owner of the land, and even the government cannot take away your land, and if it needs to for some very important purpose, it has to pay you a very good compensation. I'm oversimplifying. In many cases it doesn't happen, but it's okay. Okay. But at least the idea is there. We can always debate whether the idea is being implemented well enough or not, but at least the idea is there. So please remember that the Jagirdar is not or does not grant, not the owner, or no ownership rights were granted. The next point was about who fixes the tax rate. Meaning, see, a tax collection would be done either in cash or in kind. For example, 1/3 of the produce. For example, whether the Jagirdar will collect 1/3 of the produce as a tax, or 1/4 or 1/2, how much of the produce will be collected as a tax? That means tax rate. Who is going to decide? The king. It is not left to the Jagirdar to decide. So a Jagirdar cannot decide at their own discretion. Think of it like today also. In tax collection, whether direct or indirect tax collection, a IRS official doesn't decide. Indian Revenue Service official doesn't decide, no, I like your face, you pay less tax. I really don't like your face, you pay more tax. The rate is decided by the government, right? So what you will find is that the tax collection rates, all of these points are important, were fixed by the king. Another point is were there any hereditary rights over Jagirs? Meaning that you are a Jagirdar, so your son will become the next Jagirdar. Short answer is no. There is no hereditary rights. The king could remove any Jagirdar. The king could remove, I'll give time to ask. Let me just complete this first. The king could remove any Jagirdar without any reason whatsoever. There was no right that if I am the Jagirdar, my son would become. The king may decide to appoint my son the Jagirdar if he wishes to. Otherwise not. So there is no hereditary right. Okay. So the Jagirdari, there were no hereditary rights granted in most cases, or granted in most cases by the king. Now, there is a point that I want to tell you, and this is partly about something that I'll compare Jagirdari to another system later called the Khalisa system. Is this a very efficient system of collecting tax and maintaining troops? Firstly, forget before answering that, do you see somebody like a Jagirdar in Indian administration today? Is there any position in Indian administration today which is similar to the position of a Jagirdar? I've been saying DM and all, but that's not correct. If I was to, there is no such position. That you have somebody who's in charge of maintaining army also and is in charge of collecting taxes also. Why? There are two reasons. One is that ideally it has been argued that what if those who are in charge of military preparedness, they must only focus on one task, military preparedness. If you give them the task of revenue administration also, it will divert them from what? Military work. You don't see the Indian Army chief saying, oh, tax collection has gone up by 10%, GST collection has gone up by 15%. You don't see the Army chief sitting in the GST council meeting, right? Don't. Second is, any such individual who is given a power to maintain troops also and is given revenue collecting powers also is likely to become extremely powerful. A DM is anyways powerful. You all know that a DM is a powerful institution or authority. But imagine if DM is also said, okay, you also maintain 5,000 troops. Then one day a DM would be like, might as well as kabhi kabhi lagta hai hum hi Bhagwan. Right? And a DM may be like, let me build my own small kingdom. What I'm trying to tell you is, separation of powers is an idea जो आप पढ़ेंगे polity में, but you study it only in terms of judiciary and legislature and executive. But the fundamental idea is, if you give too much power to any one individual or authority, it is likely to be misused. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, as long as you're biological. Now, otherwise it doesn't. Power cannot corrupt the gods. Gods are gods. Now, so what you would find is that, now coming to the point that I wanted you to understand, that the Jagirdari system is making the Jagirdar a very powerful individual. That's true. But is it a very efficient system of tax collection or not? What I mean by efficient system of tax collection. Suppose I say I am the tax collector for a district. Whatever tax is collected, 1/3 I will keep. Or forget 1/3, I say 10%, forget 10%, 5%, 2%. 2% of the tax collected from the district I will keep for myself. Is it a very efficient way? You may say, yes it is. 98% of the tax collected is being given. I am the tax collector, very honest man. Okay, na khaunga na khane dunga type. So I just keep 2% for myself. 98% I give it, I collect, and I give it for king also and for maintaining army also. Is it efficient or inefficient? You can't answer this unless you have something else to compare it to. Efficiency or inefficiency is a matter of degree, right? On the other hand, and so for example, suppose for the Karol Bagh district, the tax collection is 100 crores in a year. I say 98 crores are given to government, 2 crores for my all hard work, which I did, 2 crores I keep. Think of it, the other alternative is the government of India is like, let me hire some people by doing a very good competitive exam, let them grind and I'll give them 2 lakh rupees per month and 1 car and 1 bungalow and 4 people to open doors so that they feel that they are important and are respected. And they will also collect the tax of 100 crore from Karol Bagh. Which is a more efficient system? System A or system B? What does the government do today? Does it give you a share of the revenue? No, it gives you a fixed salary. It's not like you're not the CEO of a company. By the way, anybody who's running a district is like the CEO of a $1 billion company. Not a million, a $1 billion company. For example, if you are a DM of Delhi has made 3-4 DMs different regions. So be every DM may be having area under his control, whose GDP's contribution every year would be 1,500, 2,000 crore at least. Okay, if they would have been a CEO of a company, these guys, a CEO of the company may get 5% of the profit. The DM doesn't get 5% of the revenue from this district. It gets a fixed salary. It allows the government to get the job done by spending less. So the jagirdari system is a relatively inefficient system of tax collection as compared to a system where salaried revenue collecting officials do tax collection. And that's the kind of system we have today. Yes, you have salaried tax collecting officials today, right? And you don't give those who are in charge of tax collection the power to also maintain army, right? So you have done those divisions today, and some of these things are not there in the jagirdari system. Now, a question would come to your mind, sir. If the jagirdari system is not a very efficient system of tax collection, you know it, we know it. Who also would have known it? The Mughals, unless we are assuming they are fools. Very easy to assume that people who were living in the past were fools, and we are. What is so more intelligent about scrolling Instagram endlessly and wallowing in self-pity? I fail to understand, right? So there is the idea that the past is primitive and the present is more advanced is not even true in many cases. Okay, the past is neither always primitive nor we are always more advanced. Today we may not die of disease, death and hunger as commonly as many other people may have died in the past. But I can say for surety that today it's my hunch that the more mentally anguished people are today, historically speaking, may not have been there for many a number of times ago. Today, to feel bad about your life and your existence, all you need to do is spend 10 minutes on Instagram daily. Sure shot, the route to mental health decline. I am not saying, Instagram's internal study said so, which they did not obviously publish, which was eventually put in the US Senate and Congress, that teenage suicides in US is directly proportional to the time spent on Instagram. So you may say it's a modern technological marvel, which it is, but I don't know, may not always be the best use of your mental space. Coming back, what I'm trying to tell you is it's not a very efficient system of tax collection, but still the Mughals implemented it. Why? Because it served an important purpose. What is that purpose? That purpose is it will keep whom happy? Nobles and their family members. And why is it happy? Why is it important for the king to keep the nobles and his family members happy? So that they don't rebel against whom? The king. They don't plot against whom? The king. So one big task of the king is to keep his nobles also happy. Otherwise, Nitish Kumar may leave the government if he is not happy. Where he goes, he also may not know for now. An important part of a ruler is to keep their nobles happy. And to keep their nobles happy, somebody may want to be rail minister, somebody may want to be defense minister, somebody may want to be some other minister. You have to do power sharing. Jagirdari is a system of power sharing where the king shares powers with the sections of the nobility. Gives them enough so that they don't rebel against whom? The king. It serves a power sharing function, though it is not a very efficient tax collection mechanism. Clear? So you write down this point as well, that the Jagirdari system was an important mechanism of sharing power between the king and the relatives and sections of the Mughal nobility. And it was a relatively inefficient system of what? Tax collection, as a significant share of the collected revenue was appropriated means taken, was appropriated by the Jagirdar for their own personal gains. So these are some of the basic characteristics of what? The Jagirdari system. Clear? And king and relatives, sections of the Mughal nobility. Sorry for my handwriting. If your handwriting is even worse than mine, you should focus on improving. Mine is very bad. Now, so these are certain basic characteristics of the Mughal nobility. Any doubts still here? Any questions? Yes. In the handout that, for example, they are given, you will find that I've said the Jagirdari and Mansabdari are practically the same thing. Mansab is a Jat, actually. It's a rank of a type of Jagirdar. So there are different names given to different levels of Jagirdars. Mansab is one of the ranks of a Jagirdar. So we don't go into details of ranks and all that because that's better you do in medieval. But at least this basic idea you should have. Also, not just this, before Mughals, there was a very similar system to Jagirdari or also what is called as Mansabdari. In the pre-Mughal era, there was a similar system in similar war states of revenue collection and troop maintenance that was called as IQTA. IQTA, IQTA system also. But IQTA system as well. This is partly in the pre-Mughal era. But yeah, it's almost same. Tax collection, revenue collection and troop maintenance. देखिए हर गवर्नर्स का अलग टाइटल है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल देयर आर नवाब्स, देयर आर निजाम्स. डिफरेंट गवर्नर्स वुड टेक अवे डिफरेंट टाइटल्स. For example, the Nawab, the Nizam of Hyderabad, or the governor of Hyderabad, took another title called called Nizamul Mulk. Okay, so also called as Chin Kulich Khan. Different इसको जो मना है आपका नाम आप राजा लगाएं टाइटल है ना, तो कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. तो that's there. Is this much clear? Yes, welcome. See, for example, not all Rajput rulers are being made Jagirdar. Many Rajput rulers were allowed that you continue in your territory, your rule. Okay, just have a working relationship with the Mughals. Some Rajput nobles became a part of Mughal administration, who were given prominent positions in the court of the rulers of Delhi, and they were given prominent Jagirs. Some were given Jagirs also, and they continued rule in their native areas as well. For example, I have not told you this, eventually Shivaji would be in a conflict with Aurangzeb. Mughals would say to Shivaji at a point of time that, look, we are giving your son a Jagir. We will give your son the Jagir of 6,000, the highest. You become a military commander in Mughal administration. Shivaji never accepted the offer, whatever happened. So Jagir is simply a way of sharing power. There are no rules that you cannot be given a Jagir. You can be also given, your son can also be given. It's a power sharing mechanism to keep your flock together, to keep your nobles from rebelling, and those who are already you are in conflict with, you may offer them also in the battlefield. What? Some people said, now we will never join this party. Others said, our gates are closed. But when results came, they're like, ठीक है, let's join hands. So this is power sharing mechanism. It's as simple as that. Clear? Yes. Rank literally means Jat. Yes. Yes. Yes, very good question. Where is the check here? Right? The check here is the governor. The governor is the check. The governor is supposed to be the eyes and ears of the king. Report to the king whether the Jagirdar is functioning adequately or not. And the punishment. The punishment of a Jagirdar, another check is the punishment for the Jagirdar. And that is the Jagirdar could be transferred from one Jagir to the other, could be removed, or could be killed. Simple. Hang him. Khatam. There is very clear reason that a Jagirdar is plotting against the king. Aurangzeb would be like, chalo, ho gaya. Right? So, because the highest crime a Jagirdar could commit is not appropriating some money. It is treason. Trying to plot against the king. So, they could transfer them. That's why they have not made this hereditary. That is why Jagirs are transferable. Right? So, the Jagirs were not hereditary, and you can say they are transferable. Clear? Any other question? Yes. Bhari Shab, anarchy. There was some kind of the Jagirdar is reporting to the governors, but is appointed by the king, is removed by the king. The governor is also reporting to the king. Also, there is an elaborate network of spies. See, we are not doing detail of statecraft here, but there is an elaborate network of spies. The kings would keep their own elaborate network of spies also. The Arthashastra has always been telling rulers have very strong network of spies, not over enemies, but over your own administration, because the bigger threat may not always come from outside, it may come from within. Those within the administration may try to plot an overthrow of the whom? The king. Clear? Anything else? Very nice. Let's move forward. So this is the basic about Jagirdarism. It's always good when you ask questions. If you don't ask questions, the class becomes a... See, for you, independence is happening first time. For me, if I put a track to it, at least it has happened 150 times in the last 10 years. If you ask a question, I will be able to give you more insights. If you ask nothing, what worse may happen is you may ask something that is not relevant to the exam. I may say that it's not relevant, we can talk after the class. Right. Jagirdari and, for your discussion right now, Jagirdari and Mansabdari are the same thing. Mughals. Jagirdari and Mansabdari in the pre-Mughal era is called as Ikta. This is simplification. There are some more details which you study in medieval. Yeah, in medieval. Right? Because, for example, tax collection system के बहुत details है. It's called Zapti system. It's this, that. All of that is studied in medieval. I'm only telling you what we need right now. Okay, clear? Quickly. Now let's move to, if all of this is the system. Just one second. If all of this is the system of tax collection, just one second. So if all of this is the system of tax collection and troop maintenance, coming back to the original question, why the Mughal Empire is going to decline? We'll say it will decline because the system of administration will be facing a lot of problems after the death of Aurangzeb. What are those problems? That we'll now discuss. First, if I was to say that in terms of the decline of Mughals, the first problem would be, I would say, is political instability. And you can write with me that the Mughals lacked clear rules of what? I'm also writing with you so that I also suffer the pain. Why should you suffer alone? The Mughals lacked clear rules of succession, or in bracket you can write primogeniture. This often resulted in succession disputes, in prolonged succession disputes after the death of a major, or after the death of an important what? Ruler. For example, Aurangzeb's death in 1707 triggered a prolonged, Aurangzeb's death in 1707 triggered a prolonged succession dispute that lasted where? Over a what? Decade. That lasted over a decade, between 1707 to 1719. That lasted over a decade, between 1707 to 1719. Now, here, let me tell you this context. Aurangzeb died, yes. And when Aurangzeb died in 1707, in his place, firstly his son ruled, who himself was old, Bahadur Shah, for 5 years, from 1707 to 12. After Bahadur Shah, for 1 year, ruled Jagirdari Shah. Some of the nobles in the court of Jagirdari Shah were not happy with his rule. And one of these powerful nobles were the Sayyid brothers. The Sayyid brothers themselves were nobles who came from where? Nobles who came from where? Hindustani group. And what they did was they assassinated Jahandar Shah. And in his place, they brought Farrukh Siyar, who became now the ruler for the next 6 years from 1713 to 1719. But though Farrukh Siyar had been brought to power by whom? The Sayyid brothers, hoping that this would increase Sayyid brothers' power and control over the Mughal administration. They soon realized that Farrukh Siyar, they soon realized that Farrukh Siyar is not complying, is not complying with the Sayyid brothers. He was falling short of the expectation of the Sayyid brothers. So what do the Sayyid brothers? Simple. Kill whom? Farrukh Siyar. So the Sayyid brothers eventually in 1719 again assassinated Farrukh Siyar and brought whom? The next ruler, Muhammad Shah or Muhammad Shah Rangila, who ruled up till his death in 1748. He was known as Rangila, was a name given to him because he apparently lived a lavish lifestyle. Lavish lifestyle meaning what? Having many kings, many wives. Now, lived a lavish lifestyle, focusing on the pleasures of life. Now, I'll tell you something. Every time we study history, something interesting will happen. And especially the British were notorious for doing this. देखिए, आपको किसी भी इंसान को नीचा दिखाना है तो आप क्या करिए? Get into their personal life. You will definitely find something, right? So you will definitely find something that with which you can ridicule them. I'll give you a practical example. When the British wanted to justify their removal of the rulers of Awadh in 1857, they said that the Nawab of Awadh has more than 100 wives, which is true. He had more than 100 wives. And so they said he has no interest in administration and welfare of his people. He is more interested in living a lavish life. So he is not fit for administration. So he must be removed. And so the British, so do you understand what is the conflict of interest here? The one who wants to remove the Nawab of Awadh is saying this. There is a fundamental conflict of interest. Because I want to remove the Nawab, I will say he has a lavish lifestyle and hence he is not fit for administration. Was the Nawab of Awadh the only ruler who had many wives or had a big harem or had countless number of women in his harem? No, definitely not. Certainly not. He was neither the only Mughal ruler, he was not only the only ruler who was ever known to have 100 wives. Not some world record. Many rulers have existed like that. But the moment the British wanted to justify their rule, they said that look, we will be better because we don't live like him. The idea that, see, let me give you another context. I have no wives. I am fit to rule the country. In India today, you find many such examples. You had APJ Abdul Kalam. You had Vajpayee. Okay. and other names must not be taken. But you can always argue that these people sacrificed their lives for the cause of the nation. They were not distracted by marriage. Then are we arguing that people who are not married are better suited to rule the state because they are not distracted by marriage, and more importantly children, and more importantly worrying about the welfare of their children, and they will not do nepotism? So we should have qualification criteria. One who is not married is fit enough to rule, and one who is married is not fit. India and US have a fundamental problem in our political system. We deeply interfere in the personal lives of people, and saying if they are very honest in their personal life, they will be honest in their political life, which is definitely not true. And people who live a certain political life, or very professional in the political lives, may live a personal life according to your morality. For example, in France, it is not uncommon, it has been so many French presidents who either in power divorced their wives or came to power after divorcing their wife. You think of this happening in India or in US, will never happen. When Trump was the US president, the US media closely used to follow that when the US president Trump would get down from the Air Force One, whether his wife would be holding his hand or not. They call them the first husband or the first wife, or whatever it is. There's an obsession. The French are a global power. They are a nuclear power. They are still the most powerful players in Europe. Despite the fact that they've had divorced presidents and prime ministers, there's nothing to argue that personal conduct and professional political conduct are a necessary clash. There's nothing of this sort. But we often assume. The British took this to the extreme level, saying you have 100 wives, you are not fit enough. 20 wives is okay for administration, or 5 is okay, or 2 is okay, or 1 only is okay. What is the logic? There's absolutely no logic. It is a justification. It is a justification, and coming from those who are likely to gain by making such justification. So not everything which is said must be taken at face value. Okay, nobody is denying that Wajid Ali Shah did not have 100 wives. Yes, he did. So how does it make him more or less suitable for administration? So this is not always a very valid argument, but the British would always make this argument. Whatever worked for them, they would justify giving one argument or other, always saying that the British are morally superior to Indian rulers. They not just have a right to rule because they are powerful, but because they are morally superior. Okay, Indian rulers are characterless. We are morally. So you don't think that moral argument plays a role now? It does. We keep saying people who have no kids, people who are not married, have no kids, they have no reason to be corrupt. They are not earning money for their children or for their wives. So they are not corrupt. That's such a stupid way of defining what is corruption. Hunger for power doesn't necessarily have to be because you don't have kids or siblings, so you have no hunger for power. Hunger for power consumes everyone. Okay, so oversimplistic explanations, they will never accept them at face value. It makes no sense. Now, Rangila, that's when he's being called Rangila. The question is, who's calling him Rangila? And why is he being called Rangila? The question is not the lavish lifestyle, so he is Rangila. Right? So, these all words carry a certain political. It is a perfect justification. If you need to remove a ruler, prove that he is a Rangila. You think I'm kidding? Would not our sitting Prime Minister and Chief Minister of this country, once he is termed a Rangila, will lose power? Definitely. You think it is only a matter of personal choice? It is deeply, deeply political. Okay. So let's leave this poor chap here then for the moment. His only task, I'll tell you, in 1739 when he was ruling over Delhi, Delhi was being plundered by the Persian ruler Nadir Shah. When the Persian ruler Nadir Shah came to the border of Delhi and was almost on the verge of entering Delhi, he is like, let it be. Let the music continue. Let me enjoy whatever time I have. I am sitting on the ruins of an empire. I can't revive the dead. What can I do? I can welcome Nadir Shah when he comes, sue him for peace, and till then, wait. Now you may say, he's not fighting. He knows he's not going to win the war. It is also very useful at times to not allow your civilians to suffer in a war if you are not going to win a war, and sue for peace. Okay? And so these are all complex things. Just because, so the word Rangila here was used to say that he was one who could not and did not do enough to revive the Mughal empire, which was already in decline. Okay, so that is why the word carries a certain meaning. But let it be. Now coming here, first thing that you see, by the way, Muhammad Shah Rangila was brought to the throne again by whom? Our heroes, Sayyid brothers. They are the Chanakya. Now, who is not happy with this decision? Clearly, the influence of the Sayyid brothers is rising over the Mughal court, and one would witness that the Irani and Turani sections of the nobility, now what did they do? Under the leadership of Asif Jahan I, these names are not important, right? No name is important. You just write it so that later you will find it of some use, but not now. The Irani and Turani nobility was led by Asif Jahan I, who was himself a Irani noble. And what he did was that they also organized the assassination of whom? Sayyid. They are like inko hatao. They assassinated Sayyid brothers. Why? Killing a Mughal king was a big reputational loss for the empire. Kings getting killed because of internal rivalries is never a good sign for the health of the empire. Everybody else is also watching. The Marathas are also watching. Okay. So, what they said, rather than king, kill the king. Our problem is not with the king. Our problem is with the Sayyid brothers. So, the Sayyid brothers were assassinated by Asif Jahan I. And Asif Jahan I became, after this, for some time, the Wazir or the deputy to the king of the Mughal empire. What am I trying to tell you? What is the moral of this whole story? There is a huge amount of political instability happening for two reasons. One, is there there's the absence of any clear rules of succession. Today we have clear rules of succession, na? Every 5 years there is election. And whoever gets the maximum number of seats forms the government. You have, and it's not that every 5 years we are like, okay, every 5 years, let's have bloodshed. Today, modern states and specifically in democracies, we have a relatively more systematic system of transfer of. It's a huge achievement. It's a huge achievement. Don't emphasize its importance. Because irrespective of whatever political differences between major political parties in India has been, you will find that except for the 2 years of emergency that were under Indira Gandhi, between 1947 to 2024, there has been a fairly regular and a systematic transfer of power. Many people assume, and I will tell this later again and again and again, India's achievement of India's freedom struggle was independence from the British rule. But I'll tell you, between 1947 to 1960, to be precise, 45 to 60. In these 15 years, more than 50 countries attained independence from Britain and France. Britain and France were two big colonial powers. More than 50 countries attained independence from Britain and France in these 15 years. India was one of them. What am I trying to indirectly tell you? That while India attained independence, many other countries also attained independence. And it is not a coincidence that all of them are attaining independence now. There are many other reasons. One major reason is that Britain and France are becoming very weak because of World War I and that is why many of the colonies managed to gain independence. But in most of these colonies which gained independence from British, out of this 50, you will find it tough to pick up even 5 countries which since then have had a very peaceful, systematic, regular transfer of power. This is the achievement of the Indian freedom struggle. Now you will be like, sir, why is this the achievement of Indian freedom struggle? This is the achievement of the Indian freedom struggle because from 1920 itself, to be precise, 20s, from 1920s to 1947, for almost close to 3 decades, Indians kept debating that once the British rule is gone, how will we choose our leaders and how will transfer of power happen? What I'm trying to tell you is that for a long time, Indians' freedom struggle kept preparing a plan of what they would put in place once the British are gone. I'll tell you that this is the biggest achievement of India's freedom struggle. Let me build a few more points. All of this is useful eventually. My objective in my first 3 classes is not to go very hard on history, is to help you build some perspective. Okay, and actually that's the whole point of coming to the class. बहादुर शाह ने जंदर शाह फर्रुख सियार, ये तो आप इसमें मैं क्या ही समझा रहा हूं, राइट? When India attained independence in 1947, and you would have been betting on Dream 11 that whether India will survive as a democracy for 5 years or not, the odds were against India. Everybody sitting in a Britain, a France, in USA wrote lengthy academic articles and books explaining why a collapse of India is only a matter of time. Collapse not just as a one state, but collapse of democracy in India is only a matter of time. It will happen. 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, give it. 25 years, some said, maximum. Give it. It's other won't survive. They said democracy requires many prerequisites. You require education. India's literacy rate was less than 20% in 47. You require what? People must be well educated. People must have some degree of must be economic well-being. India had high rates of poverty, right? They said there are so many languages. People living in one part of the country can't understand what people living in another part of the country say. There are so many religions. All of this also will prevent democracy from functioning in India. And they gave other reasons also, and they said nahi ho payega, tumse na ho payega. Okay, many articles and books and everything was written from Oxford professors to Cambridge professors to American professors telling na ho payega. Okay, but India did survive as a democracy in a record time of merely 3 years. India firstly managed to put a constitution in place and then largely follow the constitution. Largely, there have always been hits and misses, but largely follow the constitution. Let me give you another example. Two countries, India and Pakistan, and three, let's make it three, Sri Lanka, attained independence from the British at the same time. India's constitution is there by 3 years. Pakistan takes 8 years and puts a constitution in place only in 1956. Sri Lankans का अलग ही trip चल रहा है. Okay. What you would find is that drafting a constitution itself is a Herculean exercise, and India managed to do the world's biggest apparently in record less time. Why? Because Indians did not start thinking of how to make a constitution after independence. They had been thinking for 20 years before independence what the constitution would look like. Okay, so we did that in record and then largely followed it. Pakistan since then, up till wherever, till recently, has never had even a 5-year term where an elected government has completed its term. Always there's something or the other happening. Some military dictatorship, something. Take the example of Sri Lanka. Again, a classic example of a country which initially became a democracy, then went through a long period of military rule and emergency, then again sort of a democracy, then again military rule. Pakistan, if the prediction was right, Pakistan did not survive as a democracy and did not survive as a state also. Within a span of 25 years, meaning by 1971, Pakistan is splitting into two. Now you would say, okay, this is not a democracy, but this is, it is still not. When Pakistan is born in 1970, Bangladesh is born in 1971, it became a democracy. 1975, it went into military rule. And after that, from 1975, almost practically till the early 1990s, it is in military rule. Today, there is a Sheikh Hasina who's ruling. And it's been practically ruling for the last 15 odd years. But what happens once Sheikh Hasina is gone? Because she will go, because she is biological. Biological people die. What happens when she will die? Many don't know. Let me give you another example. Russia. You'll have the two big guys meeting very soon. I'm waiting for the meeting. See, firstly, reality TV has a big competition today from Sunset TV. Big boss is gone. The real action is in the parliament. Right? Right. Nowadays, I don't think so. But, for example, if you look at Russia, it's been 24 long years that Putin has been the head of Russia. A generation has passed which has just seen no other ruler at the helm of affairs other than Putin. The question is, what will happen once Putin is gone? And Putin will go because he is also biological. And Russia, by all practical purposes, is not a democracy. It is, I mean, I don't even think anybody considers it to be a functional Western model styled democracy, where you have regular multi-party elections, where opposition leaders are not killed. The only opposition that you would have read in the newspaper 6 months ago, I don't know, in a Serbian jail, the principal opposition leader of Russia accidentally died. In a jail, he accidentally died. There's just no opposition. What I'm trying to tell you is, India's achievement is not freedom from the British. India's achievement is that after freedom from the British, we managed to put in a constitution, which was largely the product of the Indian freedom struggle. And this is why we say that, if I was to say one more thing, but I hope you get this much point, right? So, coming back, before I leave you for today, and we'll make up for the lost time eventually in some of the later classes. What I want to tell you here is that political instability is being further fueled by what? Factionalism in the Mughal court. One side you have political instability because no rules of succession are there. On the other side you have more internal infighting amongst whom? The Mughals. That is contributing to political instability. The infighting is over being appointed as the governor, getting your family members, the bigger and the better jagirs. And also the competition is over who will have a control, more control over whom? The king. This factionalism is not there when Aurangzeb is there. Because when Aurangzeb is there, Aurangzeb would control the nobles. The nobles would not control Aurangzeb. Okay. So that's one of the things. And there was no question of somebody plotting an assassination of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb had made a statement very early on, killing everybody else. Don't mess with me. Right? If I would not spare my brothers, maintain distance. Right? In fact, Arthashastra, and you're like, sir, why do we always keep coming to Arthashastra? But the Arthashastra, for example, tells a whole elaborate set of rules. King must never eat food. King must never eat food without taking adequate measure that it has been first eaten by somebody else, because you can be poisoned. Putin is the best guy to kill like this. Putin is the perfect executioner, if you were to say, as alleged by the West. Disclaimer from my side. Okay. The Russian government under Putin has been accused of using nerve chemical warfare agents like Novichok, जिसका नाम भी नहीं सुना होगा आपने. Basically, just not even a drop. If it touches your body, you will die in the next 10 seconds. That's it. No trace, nothing. It leaves nothing. And they did this in Britain, attacking anti-Putin Russian protesters in Britain. This is full. So this is not a democracy. Putting in jail for some time is good for politicians. Their stature rises. Gandhi went to jail countless number of times, but he managed to come out. The British are not assassinating Gandhi in jail. Students would often ask me this question, that if Gandhi was posing so much trouble for whom? British, then why would the British simply not kill him? Right? We have to understand that Western style democratic systems do not see this as a very sensible way of doing transfer of powers in many cases. Sometimes they also do assassination. It's not that only Russia does assassination. The Americans have had their fair share of political assassinations as well. Okay. But often they would refrain from such, because a question would arise. You kill one, who will replace them? The British also felt, some British said, that Gandhi is the best policeman we ever had, because Indians listen to Gandhi. If you kill Gandhi, then British have nobody to talk to. And if Indians pick up arms in large number against the British, it's a problem for the British. So killing Gandhi may not be a very sensible solution for whom? The British. I hope I've given you some context here to understand why political assassinations are not carried out very often today. Okay. Putting leaders in jail, like Nelson Mandela was in jail for 27 years. Okay. He was in jail for 27 years, but he was released. Why he was not killed for those 27 years? When he was released, it is Nelson Mandela who in South Africa brought the blacks and the whites together. The South African government needed somebody whom the blacks of South Africa listened to and respected. Otherwise, the whites of South Africa would have no future in South Africa. So, killing senior leaders is not a way of transferring power. It's a way of creating political confusion and civil war and anarchy. Classic example, the assassination of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. by US forces. The US forces practically made it possible for Saddam Hussein to be killed in Iraq. Once Saddam Hussein died, Iraq since then has been under a deep political mess. Because in their hurry to remove Saddam Hussein, they did not answer a more fundamental question. What happens after Saddam Hussein goes? And he got big. Saddam Hussein died in 2001. It has been 24 long years of political instability in Iraq because nobody cared to answer the question, what happens when a leader dies? Is there a system to put in place a new ruler? Okay. So what will happen to Putin? The world will watch. It's not a concern about a country like India because we have a regular system of transfer of power. What we take in India for granted is a rare achievement achieved over which countries? Over the past, as I said, right, that after 50 years of, out of these 50 countries, I can't find even 5 who can claim that they've had a very fair system of, regular system of transfer of power. So it's a big achievement. And its significance is that you are all sitting here and preparing for this exam. Because the bureaucracy is a classic example. Indian bureaucracy is a classic example. It doesn't matter who is ruling, one political party or the other. The bureaucracy does its job. Right? So, whether it is the BJP or tomorrow it's the Congress or whatever, it doesn't matter. The bureaucracy serves the government of India, whoever is in power. You have a system in place. People think it's about having leader, but it's more about having system because leaders die and great leaders are those leaders who build resilient systems. So the leadership of the Indian freedom struggle made one huge contribution to India's success is that it gave India a system which has more or less worked for it. And the absence of this system you can see everywhere in the developing world. They deal with political confusion, chaos, instability, which often results in a poor economy and all sorts of problems, right? Too much tamasha for one day. We'll stop here. And tomorrow we will, tomorrow is Saturday. Yes, so tomorrow we'll continue from 2 o'clock. Apologies for today not being starting at 2 as I would have wanted to, but that's okay. Now, we'll stop here. Tomorrow I'll see you.